All right. Happy Tuesday, everyone, and welcome back to another Learning Tech Talks, where we are continuing to explore the landscape of learning and workplace tech while cutting through the fluff. Today, we're talking about, I'm joined by Kian Katan-Farouche, again from Workera AI, and he's back. It's been 5 months. I think we discussed this. It's been about 5 months since you were on the show, and a fair amount has happened in that time with some exciting things to come, which we will get to today. But we're going to be talking about skills measurement. We'll get a little bit into the ontology, taxonomy discussion, measuring power skill. We have a lot to talk through, don't you think? I think we've got a fair amount to talk through in an hour.
For sure.
Yeah. All right. Well, and we want to make sure, because we know some people may not have caught the first episode, so we'll warm things up as we get going here, and then dig into the conversation. But for those who aren't familiar, I'm where I always am, and my background. For those of you who saw last week, I had my birthday decorations all over. I am back to Fred and my map of the states here, but I'm still in Waukesha, where I always am. But Kian, how about you? Where are you?
I'm in San Francisco, same as last time we talked, but different apartment now.
I was going to say the background looks a little bit different. It is not one that I'm familiar with. Interestingly, though, the green frog on the dresser back there, my son has that exact same green frog. I was looking at it going,
Really?
It's the exact same one. He literally has it sitting downstairs. I don't recognize any of the other decorations, though.
It's more popular than I thought.
I know. All right. And so then, as we're kind of chatting here, getting warmed up. So have you done anything? You're the one who even said, you go, what's my icebreaker question? And it made me realize I haven't been doing the icebreaker questions for a while. So I thought I'd revisited this a little more low key, but it's summertime. Have you done anything fun over the summer so far? Anything that really stood out?
Yeah, the summer's been good. I was in Mexico City 2 weeks ago for Workera's annual company retreat, where as a remote company, we don't get to see each other every day. But when we get together, we enjoy the face-to-face time. And so we spent a week there, a lot of nice workshop, working sessions, and also visits of Teotihuacan and the pyramids there. It was really nice.
Wow, nice. So you spent how many folks are at Workera now?
We're about 55 right now, roughly.
Okay.
Yeah.
And all right. So 50. Wow, that's a big crew of people to take down to Mexico for a week. That's pretty fun.
Yeah.
All right. So it was a mix of business and pleasure then.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. All right. Well, that sounds like that's a highlight for the summer. I can see that. Mm-hmm. I don't know that mine is maybe I turned 40 last week. That was probably the highlight. We had some fun. We didn't do anything crazy. I didn't have any, midlife crisis moments. I didn't go out and buy a sports car or anything like that. So nothing to report there. But for those who, let's do a little bit of background on you as well. Again, for those who may not be familiar, because you're leading Workera, which for those of you who may not know, really focuses on how would you describe skill assessment? Is that really kind of the space you're playing in, using AI to automate skill assessment?
Yeah. We call each other a skills intelligence platform, and skills intelligence platform, and we redefine essentially how enterprises understand talent, develop and mobilize talent, and we do it with actionable skills insights across multiple domains of technology and beyond.
Okay. Well, and I think that's why, for those who are listening and watching, and are listening and watching later, you're going to see why we're going to spend so much time discussing this whole skills piece, because it's a huge topic of conversation in the industry right now. But the actual measurement and assessment of skills, that is often less focused on. So we're going to get into some of that. We'll talk a little bit about how, but I am curious, refresh my memory on this. How did you end up in this space? Like, what ended up leading you to start working? Like, why did you go down this path?
Yeah. Prior to Workera, I was working with Andrew Ng, who's the co-founder of Coursera.
Yeah. Okay.
Both at Stanford, where we teach together the deep learning classes on campus, and also outside of campus, where we work together in starting a company called deeplearning.ai, with the focus of democratizing access to AI education around the world. We've taught AI probably to over 3 million people to date through deeplearning.ai. And one thing that we observed is that people were taking classes, but they were telling us there's so much content out there. There's no shortage of content. It's not the limiting factor in our careers. The limiting factor, in fact, is our ability to understand our skills. What do we have? What do we not have? Where do we stand? What to do next? And this problem was observed at the individual level, but also at the organizational level, where companies were telling us, we have a huge workforce, we want to retain, we want to grow, we want to develop, but we don't even know where to start because we don't have any visibility of our skills. And this led to the focus on really skills assessment, measurement, mentorship, and mapping of these skills to career goals.
Okay. And that brings me back to, because I do remember when we first talked, and even when we first got to know each other, because that was before we even did our first session, it was very technical focus. I mean, your background, you're a bit of a tech head, right? Would you associate yourself with the tech community? Is that your primary skill set?
Yeah, that's definitely where I come from. But we aspire to measure really any skill, so we don't stop at tech necessarily. Yeah.
Okay. Well, and that's where I want to go with kind of the journey as we step forward here. But and I totally forgot what I was going to say about this now. Anyway, no, that's super well, and it's helpful that, you know, I think we talk about this skills piece much broader than just hard skills, which I think is a lot of times when we talk about skill assessments, that's where a lot of the focus is, especially in technical AI, coding languages. Because, and we kind of joked about this backstage before we went live, it's kind of like assessing math. It's a little bit easier to go, well, okay, if there's a math equation and you solved it, I know you have the skill to solve it. Versus some of these other skills can be a little bit more complex in terms of figuring out, well, what data points do we need to actually determine whether you're good at this? So I am curious the journey, though, because I think this will lead up to where you're going, because you did start really with a heavy focus on assessing technical skills, correct?
Yeah, exactly. We identified that there's a huge shortage of tech skills, and it's still going and growing. And we started Workera focused on technical data and AI skills. So typically people from centers of excellence, they may be called machine learning engineers, data scientists, data analysts, software engineers, data engineers, etc., etc. Then shortly after launching, we expanded to company-wide data and AI transformation assessment. So we can assess people in the center of excellence. We can assess people that we call AI or data plus X. Those are engineers, scientists, analysts, that are domain experts at something else, but they want to bring an AI toolkit or a data toolkit to their work. And in fact, the class I teach at Stanford with Andrew Ng, 2/3 of our students are not from the computer science department, even if the class is a graduate course in computer science. They're coming from material science, chemical engineering, mechanical engineering, etc., and they're trying to acquire that toolkit. So that's a huge group in the enterprise. And
so let me ask you a question. I hate to jump in, but I have to, because I'm really curious on this. That second group of folks who are coming in from maybe a computer technical side of things, is it still somewhat technical in terms of what they're leading? And because that's my question there, because one of the things that I've seen is there is organizationally this need for what I would call data acumen, where it's like, technical acumen, it really doesn't matter what you lead, whether you're HR, whether you're running a business function, fine. You have to have a certain level of technical understanding really to thrive in today's workforce. And I'm curious if that's the category you're talking about.
This is still a technical category. So we have, out of 4 categories, the 2 top categories, Center of Excellence and AI and Data Plus Next, are practitioners. That's what we call them. And then we move to the non-practitioners.
So those first 2 categories, they would be still practitioners of the technical side of things. And you've got a third that you start creeping outside that line.
Yeah, but if you want to separate them, you would say some of them are builders of the system, some of them are users of the system, which is a slightly different skill set to develop.
Okay, got it.
But yeah, the two other categories are what you were just exactly talking about. We call it data fluent and data literacy. Data fluency are folks that are interacting with technical people and need to be able to be fluent in communicating with them or strategizing with them. And then literacy is everyone else in the company that needs to be part of the cultural shift, needs to be a part of the change management. And so we do that for data and AI. That's a transformational framework, but we also do it for other innovation related skills. Our focus right now is really any skill that is critical in the next 5 years to build a good enterprise and a good system. So that includes cybersecurity, that includes cloud, that includes DevOps, data engineering, etc., etc. And then we get into soon launching a set of soft power human skills, as you want to call it.
Okay, well, we're gonna get to that one next. But before we do that third category, I want to focus some effort right there, because I see different awarenesses in organizations of that need for that skill set. I think there's still some of this persistent, I don't really need to worry about the technical side of things because I don't have to do it. And other organizations are going, the future is technical. It doesn't really matter what your job is. You have to have some degree of understanding. Are you seeing a shift in greater awareness and greater focus on kind of raising that bar enterprise-wide, regardless of what skills people are doing?
Yeah. I would say not everybody needs to be a practitioner.
Correct. I would agree.
Yeah, but people will benefit from more technical skills. What I believe is that if you look at the journey of coding from 30 years ago to today, it was a very specialized skill that only certain technical folks, usually in niche areas, would have. Today, a lot of people code. Even a business analyst or a consultant usually codes.
Something.
Yeah, code something. And I think for data and AI, it will be the same journey, but even more than that, in the sense that even more people will benefit from understanding how to analyze data, how to clean data, how to understand basic statistics or visualize data. I think every job category will be touched to a certain extent.
Okay. Well, and some of the ones even outside the lanes, because one example that comes to mind for me was there was an organization I was kind of collaborating with on, and their commercial teams, their products were highly technical and were starting to be augmented with artificial intelligence. Their commercial teams had historically shied away from technical. They're like, we don't really need to know that. That's for our product and engineers to have to know. But the problem was they were having conversations with customers, and customers were asking questions about the product. And they didn't have that fluency to even really have a fundamental understanding of how the AI was working in the products. Sure. And they really just hit a wall because they're like, they would either make it up, which was worse, like don't make it up. Hard. Or they would just go, well, I'm not sure, which isn't a great customer experience to go, I'm just asking like the basics of how is your AI improving the way the product works? And they just, well, I don't know. Which that would have been a role that historically people might have said, no, they're sales. They're sales. They're selling. They're not talking tech, but they are now.
No, I completely agree. Good luck being a technical seller without being literate in AI, data, cyber, cloud. You need all that level of literacy to be able to answer customer questions. But it's the same for recruiters as well. Good luck being a recruiter if you're trying to staff technical teams, but you cannot have a conversation or review the background of someone. And same for project managers. If you're project managing a data project, but you don't understand the workflow, it's not going to work. Simply, it's not going to work the same way.
So this might tie to our next category of where you're going with things. But Boss brought up a really good question on the technical side of things, that we're talking about how if you're a non-technical person, you have to raise your fluency in non-technical skill or in technical skills because you're interfacing so much with this. There's also the reverse of, there was a time, and maybe it's, I don't know, I'm not in the technical space as much as I used to, where if you were super technical, you didn't really have to interface with business folks or customers or anything like that. And so you didn't really have to know the language or be able to do much with it, and that was fine. Now, in many regards, that's shifting. So are you doing any of the reverse with some of this as well, where you're going, you know what, with technical skills, we need to improve things like regular business fluency and storytelling?
Yeah, for sure. I'd say two things. One is, when we think about launching soft skills, human skills, there's two ways to look at it. There's a lens of, hey, we're going to add these skills to the pathways of technical folks so that they can acquire them, they can assess themselves in those human skills and business skills, and build it for their career. And then you have another lens at which you want to look at it, which is everyone else, not only technical folks, but everyone needs to assess themselves in business skill and human skill. The second thing I wanted to say regarding this question is, this is a shift in job categories that is happening right now. You may have heard the term product engineer becoming really trendy, where historically engineers are looked at as a build shop where you send requirement and you get back product.
Yep.
But today it's completely shifting. The best engineers are, apart from those working on platform or backend that is not really user facing, the best user facing engineers are considered product engineers, because they can understand the business context, they can understand the product and the outcomes that they're trying to drive, and they can make the decisions hand in hand with a product manager or product designer or product owner. And this is definitely a trend we're seeing as well. Yeah.
Okay. Well, and that kind of gets to the whole confusion on even assessing skills in your organization, because that kind of nuance can be a challenge if you don't understand the skills, either one that you're bringing in or the skills that you have, because that I've seen that capability where it's almost, you're multilingual in business and tech, and you understand this and you're able to translate, okay, this is really what they're asking for, but I know the way they're asking for it, the product design, they're going to have no idea what they're talking about. They're going to do it a different way. And they're actually serving as that intermediary in between. But that's a different skill set than being really, really good at the deep technical skills, or just very light in the technical, but business focus. So I can see where if you don't have visibility into that, finding a solid product engineer where you go, we need a product engineer. Yeah. Your recruiting team's going to have a hard time figuring out, well, I don't really know how to assess that.
Yeah, for sure. You don't really know how to assess that. But the best, my favorite org design is where you minimize the lines of communication as much as possible. It may sound counterintuitive where you want everybody to communicate, but actually having a product engineer and a business counterpart that also speaks technical is a way to not only limit the number of communication, make people more autonomous, and it's an alternative to having someone who's purely business, someone who's purely engineer, and in the middle, a translator, essentially, that's trying to bridge the gap. That's not going to move as fast, from an org design perspective.
No, from an org design, you're building additional steps into the system, and this is where things break down, because there's always we've all played the game telephone, where by the time it translates through multiple people, things have changed. So I agree, but you don't get to that point if you don't raise the technical skills of your business folks and raise the business skills of your technical folks so that they can have a meaningful conversation just directly. And I think that's where we're going to see things shift.
Yeah.
But this does tie to the taxonomy and ontology discussion, because you've got to have some sort of framework to build off of. So how are orgs doing that now? Because this has been a bit of a black hole. Again, this is another one of those terms that gets tossed around a lot. Oh, we're building a skills taxonomy type of a thing. But it's very ambiguous. It's ubiquitous. It's very vague in terms of that. So I'm curious how you've seen orgs move down that journey and actually start to make some progress in this department.
Yeah, that's ontology taxonomy is a big topic, and there are many taxonomies and ontologies out there. But at the end of the day, what matters is that leaders and managers can choose what skills they care about today and the future. They can choose and describe it. They can outline those skills for their workforce in a way that each employee essentially has a career pathway mapping to the needs of their company. And so if you want to have such an ontology, you need the skills that you define to be relevant to projects and business outcomes. So you need the ontology to be granular. You cannot have digital literacy be a single skill.
You can't.
Yeah, you cannot. You need to know if the employee is able to describe how the data flows between two systems, if the employee understands the difference between a back-end engineer and a front-end engineer. Each skill essentially is granular, atomic, and has to be connected with the level of cognitive complexity. So, for example, you may have skills at Workera. We use a modified version of Bloom's taxonomy when we talk about skills, where certain skills may be asking an employee to remember a concept. Certain skills may be asking an employee to apply a concept. Certain skills may be asking employees to analyze the situation, synthesize it, maybe create something. Each skill is different, and you need to be able to define it at the atomic level.
Well, and interestingly, the way I frame this up, and I'm curious if we're on the same page here, because I think your point of, and this is where I think things have fallen short historically, is we've stopped at, and again, it's a word salad depending on what org, competencies, skills, capabilities, right? All these words get kind of thrown around. But at the end of the day, this granular level you're talking about, from my perspective, is we're actually talking about behaviors. Like, what are the things we want to see people doing so that we can then measure that? Because if we don't get to that level of granularity and we leave it at this communication or servant leadership, or, like you said, data literacy, how would you actually demonstrate that? We need to know that level of granularity, and those are going to change. Data literacy may stay a skill that's durable for a period of time, but the behaviors are going to change. And I think that has to be more flexible.
For sure. Yeah, I completely agree. There's 3 levels for an organization to be able to fully embrace measurement as part of their culture. One is being able to define your outcomes or projects. That's it. Then you go one level down. You cannot measure directly at this level. It's just not reasonable. There's no system that can measure directly at that level accurately. Yeah. So you go one level. Yeah.
No, well, I laugh about that because I think a lot of times this is what people are pursuing. They stop there at like the project level.
They want to measure.
And they want to measure. They're like, did we do it? And it's like, well, we don't know, because you got to go deeper than that.
Yeah. Humans are complex. You need to go deeper because humans are too complex. You cannot find the mapping directly to projects. But if you go one level down and call it behaviors, and you have sort of a framework, call it the ontology, that you can use to define aligned behaviors, skills, competencies to the projects, then you can, as a manager or as a leader, make that bridge. And now it's the half of the work has been done. Like, this is really hard already. Once you're here, then the rest is measurement. Now you can start measuring those behaviors, skills, competencies, and you can have rigorous approaches that can do that. And then you can flow back to the projects. These are the 3 steps really to look at, in my opinion.
Yeah. No, and I think I really like the breakdown that you take with that. And I think the part that you acknowledge that I think is important to acknowledge is that is work. I mean, it's not easy to necessarily do that. And I think sometimes there is this tendency to go, well, that's a lot of work. Can't we just measure whether or not we did the project? And it's like, well, no, otherwise you're just kind of guessing at whether or not you actually had an impact on that, because you have to take the time to actually correlate that back to things.
Yeah, it's a lot of work, but it's great investment. That's what the best organizations do today. The ones that can reinvent themselves completely, they embrace these frameworks.
So let me ask this then: how is technology helping that? Because I will say I've worked with orgs and collaborated with orgs where sometimes it can feel like you want to throw in the towel, because what you just described in terms of these 3 levels can feel like an overwhelming feat. And orgs can say, there's just no way. The complexity of that is too deep for where we are. But my experience has been technology is actually helping tremendously, not make it easy, but at least accelerate some of these things that would have taken just an enormous amount of effort.
Yeah, I think for the side of technology, there's 2 different discussions. One is, how much progress have we made as a community in terms of skills ontology? Like the ability to define behaviors and skills related to the projects we care about. And then there's another discussion, which is, what can technology bring to measurement, really? And so assuming for now that you have an ontology, that you can plug in, you can modify, you can edit, you can configure, you can define the skills you care about. And now you have pretty much full alignment between your projects and the behaviors you want your workforce to display. Per function, per geography, per department, those behaviors are going to be different. Now you go one level down and you say, how are we going to measure those skills? Because one of the most limiting factor to unlocking the potential of our workforce is unknown unknowns. It's just they don't know what they need to do. If we can uncover that for them, now we have a plan to build those skills, and it will have a direct impact on the behaviors and then on the project. And so this is where it's complicated. My opinion and my recommendation is every skill can be measured, but they cannot be measured in the same way. And also, when you are trying to measure employees, you have to balance high friction, high validity assessments that are very rigorous and are much more valid with maybe low friction, lower validity assessments that people like to take because it's not very painful, but it
doesn't tell you anything.
Yeah, it doesn't tell you much. So for example, when I hear, we plugged in something in the workflow of this person, of course it's low friction because they don't even feel it. You're just collecting data and you're analyzing it, but it's going to be much more noisy. So you have to use both. You need both approaches. What we do at Workera is we actually recommend to the enterprises that they start with our highest friction, highest validity assessments, because when you kick off a program, you create this momentum, and it's very easy actually to get employees to get excited about
because they're excited. I mean, the energy is at the beginning of the train, and people have the energy. They're excited. They want to do it. And you do that later in the game.
And our baseline is actually 70 to 80% of employees will complete all the assessments that they've been configured by their managers to complete within 2 to 4 weeks of a launch. And then you have a good baseline for everyone. And when you have a good baseline, it's much more easy to track progress than to baseline progress. So now you can use lower friction, lower validity assessment to track how are people moving up from that baseline. And maybe every 3 months or every 6 months, you have the opportunity to do another hardcore assessment or another baseline, but you cannot do that every day, essentially.
It's interesting you bring, and I don't know if there's anything we can kind of show just for folks to kind of gauge what this looks like, but that whole point you're bringing up of actually incorporating a mix of high friction, intensive skill assessment with kind of this lighter, because I think sometimes the debate is, well, one or the other, and I agree with you. It's like it's not one or the other. It's both. It's strategically using them to kind of, one, capture what your baseline data is, pulse along the way, and then again, potentially have something that is higher friction again to go, did you move? You were here before. Did you actually move? We've been pulsing it. We kind of have a sense, but it's not comprehensive. We need that hard friction assessment again to actually determine, well, did we quantifiably shift behavior?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I can show you what it looks like on our end if you want.
Yeah. Let's do that. All right, I'll pull it up here.
Oh, super. So this is our user-centric view. There's also an admin view where you get access to all the data at an aggregate level for the organization to track the group progress. But here you can really, as a manager, configure the skills you'd like to see in your workforce at a very granular atomic level for your workforce. So this is me on the platform.
So this would be that higher friction, like you're about to kick off something where you've got a lot of momentum around a set of skills, and you're going, look, before we engage in this, we need to figure out where everyone's at from a skill standpoint.
Yeah, exactly. So this is really the baseline part where, I could have been set up on different domains. I could be a data literacy skill set. I could be on a business analyst skill set, data scientist skill set, deep learning engineer skill set. The manager can decide what skills I need to develop and demonstrate. And so here I'm going to show you the Workera business analyst skill set that was configured here by the manager. And the first step is really to educate the user and to tell them what do we want to measure them on. There's different domains that you're going to be measured on: data science, math, business analytics. This has all.
Is this that leveling you were talking about before, where you have the high level, data business analyst might be the higher level, but now we're getting into kind of more the core behaviors or skills that are within that umbrella term.
Correct. And each of these domains is also sometimes tens, hundreds of skills. Each of these domains.
So that even may have greater complexity into, so data science is one thing, but now that's going to branch out into a whole bunch of behaviors and skills.
Correct. So in this case, I've already done my baseline in data science. So I've taken the baseline and I received a score that is baseline score of 115. And my manager wanted me to be at 211. This score is not just a number, it's also defined by what we call a proficiency level descriptor, which describes what you can expect someone at this level of score to achieve on the job, what behaviors they display. And then that's where you have done the baseline. You are shown the skills that we've predicted are or are not present in your skill set. So in this case, I've been identified across 17 skills, some of which the engine predicts that I have, some of which predicted that I don't have. And then this is where the more granular measurement comes in, where on a day-to-day basis.
Well, and even looking at the way I'm looking at the wording of these, this gets back to that more layman terms, granular behavior type things. Can this person do this activity? They're either, they need to improve on it, or no, they're solid at doing this activity in tangible terms, in terms of you would actually see these behaviors demonstrated in a project.
Correct. And that's exactly the level at which the manager can tag a project and identify who has the skills relevant in that project, essentially. Because when you look at translating product requirements into a classification metric using true positives, false positive, true negatives, false negative, this is something that you would expect someone to do on a project, essentially.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, these are actual activities where you go, if we're doing this project, so this goes back to what you were talking about before, where one of the first steps in being a skills-driven organization is actually getting to the level where you are connecting these types of things to projects and defining that in these projects, these types of things need to happen. So we need to map these things back so that we can assess people and then can say, this person is perfectly capable of doing this project, or to do it well, we're going to need to improve these granular areas of focus.
Exactly. And now you have a project pop up with hypothesis testing as an important skill involved in the project. Then you can, on your end as a manager or leader, identify who has the ability to define good hypotheses in a hypothesis test, who is able to calculate the variance of a random variable, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, let me ask you this with this level of granularity, because because I again, Nancy, I agree with you. I think getting to this state of being able to connect this and saying, okay, here's what we're trying to do. Here are the high level things that we know need to fit into that project. And then here's at a deeper level, the specific granular activities that go along with that, so we can match people back to it. To some degree, that requires leaders and managers to have a tighter picture of what actual activity needs to happen along these activities. How are you seeing organizations navigate that? Because I mean, we're talking a lot about the manager's involvement and kind of knowing here's what we're trying to get done and who needs to be involved in that. There's a level of accountability on the manager to have that level of knowledge and kind of detail on what actually needs to get done. Is that a gap, or are you seeing orgs for the most part, they have that figured out?
I would not say that the manager needs to be omniscient, and the manager doesn't need to have all the skills of their direct reports. But the manager needs to be a driver. The best organizations from a learning perspective I've worked with are those where the managers are actually driving and caring about their workforce, reinventing themselves, and are also using these tools as a way to augment themselves. So, you work with people that manage hundreds of team members. They barely know the names of everyone on the team. How are they supposed to know everyone's skill set? And how are they supposed to have enough time to assess themselves, the skill sets of everyone? You can now, with those type of approaches, have access to aggregate level data across your entire org, but also personal level data when the employee wants to share certain of their milestones and scores and skills in order for them to unlock projects. It makes the life of managers much easier when they embrace these approaches.
Well, and I think that point you just brought up is a really important one because, there's a lot of pressure on managers right now. A lot of pressure on managers as first of all, one, the workforce they maybe at least had proximity to, now that's being displaced and all these other things. And to your point, if you've got this huge team of folks, you may not necessarily know all of the details of, well, who can really do what and who's capable of what. But we're not asking them to become subject matter experts in every single one of these things. But really what this does is this provides them visibility into, well, what skills do I actually have in my teams? Who can do what? So they're really more in the driver's seat of the role of saying, what do we actually need to accomplish? Let's actually map this back. And I'm sure it has to be inclusive of bringing people together to talk about this. Because I have to imagine there's times you think you need certain skills or capabilities, and it turns out we picked the wrong thing.
Completely true. And if you want to show, I want to just talk a little bit about benchmarking,
Sure.
because this is where it comes in. I see all the time managers, ask their teams to take the assessments or leaders and realize that there is a gap they were not foreseeing. And now they can see the gap. They can see how far are we from the best in class organization in that specific skill set. And then they can start strategizing. They can anticipate that there's going to be a problem on certain projects because there are certain skills or behaviors that we just don't have currently. Then the solution may be diverse. It may be upskilling, it may be reskilling, it may be hiring, who knows? But at least now they have visibility over certain gaps and they can make informed decisions.
Yeah. Well, and I think some of that's organizational culture as well. I think this has been one of the challenges that organizations have had with skills is they may know that they're missing something, but they don't know what it is and they don't know how bad it is or what to do about it. And I think what you're talking about here is this is actually then giving you visibility into what gaps do you actually have so that you can do something about it. Yeah. I am curious though, what is the response from, I mean, I can imagine no doubt organizations are thrilled about it because they can go, well, now we have better visibility into what people can do and can't do and where we need to grow and what our capabilities are. What is kind of the initial response from individuals on this? Because I can see there being a little bit of a mixed review. Sometimes there's a bit of the Dunning-Kruger effect where people think they're way better at things than they actually are. And this is kind of an objective picture into, oh, is that met, for the most part, do you find people meet that really positively or is there some resistance to it?
Yeah, it's a great question. Assessments have been used for thousands of years, but mostly in pass-fail situations.
Yeah.
So, get a job, don't get a job. Get into a school, don't get into a school. This doesn't work when it comes to assessing in a formative fashion. And so the way we recommend approaching it, and that's how the platform has been designed, is it's a formative platform. You take a test, you get instant feedback, predictions, you can unlock projects, you can become a mentor, you can be matched to a mentor. Managers need to put as much carrots as possible for the team to be excited about these assessments. Then you find also from a privacy perspective, different cultures. Certain organizations are all in, meaning the manager will share their scores across all the skills to their team and be very confident about doing that in order to create the momentum. It's fully transparent. Certain organizations are going to say only the individual can show their score whenever they want. So if they want to, they can. If they don't want to, they cannot. But at least on Workera, you can see the aggregate level at an org level. So different cultures will take different approaches. But what's the most important is to frame it positively, excite the workforce. And as I said, we see employees being really happy to take those assessments because they cover their unknown unknowns. And they're like, oh, wow, there are 74 skills on that area that I had no idea I needed, but I actually need because my manager wants me to do this, and they map to a project. Yeah.
Well, and I think you hit on two things that I think are really important there. So, the first one is how you frame this really does make a big difference. If you're framing this as we're going to use this assessment so that we can figure out how to make cuts in the organization, I mean, that's going to be the wrong use case, and it is not going to be received well whatsoever because it's just, from my perspective, an improper use of this. That's not how you want to do this. You want to do this in terms of this is designed as a development opportunity to say, here's where your gaps are. We all have gaps. I mean, nobody's coming out of this thing just checked every single box all the way maxed out. It's more saying, and this I think has been one of the frustrations of the workforce, is they keep hearing they need to reskill, upskill, but they're not necessarily given the guidance or direction on what. And instead they're just left with go upskill yourself in these big mega categories, which can feel far too ethereal for people to actually action against. So done right, I can see where the workforce would be very open to accepting this.
Yeah. And exactly as you said, this is framed to create opportunity. That's the most important thing, not to remove opportunity. There's so much more to an employee's performance than you can see on these dashboards. There's so much more. There's tens of thousands of skills that they're using on a daily basis that really matter in their job. We're not judging them. We're really giving them the opportunity to demonstrate some high-end top skills that are needed for projects in the next few years, so that they can unlock their potential in their career, be matched to things that are needed to build the future.
Okay. Well, what you just said there, though, that's an important expectation to make sure is clear for folks, and even folks listening and thinking about this, is there is a lot more to the individual than even just some of these key skills that we go, these are the base core skills you have to do the job. But there's a lot of things you're putting into practice. And to just sit and look at this as like an assessment, a judgment report of, well, here's Keon's capability or value as an employee. That's the wrong framing of this type of skill assessment for an organization.
Correct.
Okay. Well, and I think, Nancy, you brought up a really good point on this. I am curious, with some of this. So as organizations look at this, because then I want to go to another point. She brings up, and I think to me, this is where I see tremendous value as a learning leader, because a lot of times we're in this weird state where we're told to develop skills, but we don't always have visibility into, what skills, who needs them, how do we actually prioritize these? And this is actually feeding really our pipeline of where are these core categories. So I'm curious if you have some examples, or how are organizations then actioning against this? Because let's say you get a skills report and you go, all right, here's where I'm at. I need to develop in these areas. How then is that tying to here's what development looks like for the individual or for the aggregate?
Yeah. That's a great question. And when you start having access to this skills data that you have access to, there's a lot of talent strategies that can now work better. The primary application that our clients use are what is called precision upskilling. It's really now that I know the proficiencies of my employees, I don't have to set a one-size-fits-all solution for everyone. Everybody takes the same class. I can start personalizing, and we're integrated with companies like Coursera, DataCamp, LinkedIn Learning, etc., in order to be able to personalize the learning for each employee and fuel also free content in there. The key here to take into account is you want to really separate your content from your measurement scale, because you want your measurement scale to be here year over year. You want to benchmark today, but you also want to look at your progress against the same measurement scale in a year from now, in 2 years from now, if you have a transformational mandate. Content comes and goes. I've worked with teams which start with LinkedIn Learning because there's great content at the business skill level, and then they want to move to more technical. They embrace Coursera, which has great content, and then they move up to Udacity because it's more high touch and project based and mentorship based.
It's like boot camp. Oh yeah, there's different categories.
It comes and goes. So employees will have different needs, but what matters is you can have an objective that is for the goals you've defined in your ontology of your skills being growing year over year, essentially. I've talked a little bit. Yeah. No, I was just saying, so that's the upskilling part. I talked a little bit about the project matching part. Certain companies may use these skills data for workforce alignment. So imagine you have teams across geographies and departments, and you want to set a set standard across all geographies for skills development. Now you have a way to set it because you have a standardized a score across the board. And you can also use it for advanced skill search, for talent marketplace, which is a very hot topic. It really can be used for many different purposes.
It's really interesting. Well, so two things. One, I think your point about the content strategy, there are so many things I just look back at and go, this is the ones and zeros of a lot of the work that learning and talent leaders are trying to solve for. And a lot of times it's one of the things that isn't always the hyper focus for that. We're focused in some of these other areas. And I just even think the content strategy, the discussion of, well, do we need this content platform or this content platform? Well, if you don't have the data on what skills are actually missing or needed or how deep you need to go with them, you're making decisions incomplete. It's not that you're making a bad decision. It's just you don't actually have the data to make an accurate decision. And same thing with a talent mobility platform. Well, we want to mobilize talent and create greater opportunity. Based on what? The projects have to be aligned to data based on skills, because if they're not, you're going to end up shuffling people into things they don't like or they aren't capable of doing. It's going to create a really bad experience if you're trying to do these end game things, which I think sometimes happens. And I think sometimes even the tech gets a bad name. You might look at like an LXP. Sometimes LXPs get peppered with, oh, well, they just don't do a good job personalizing. I mean, they're only as good as the data they're based on. If it doesn't really know what skills people need, it can't make good predictions on, well, here's something that's actually really relevant because I know what you're trying to develop in.
Yeah, I can only agree. I think when you put poor data in a system, you will get poor outputs out of the system. It's just how it works. Today, there are many platforms who have a ton of data, but unfortunately the data is too high level. Maybe the like digital literacy, as we were saying, is one skill and you cannot go deep down. So you can really not do any prediction that is meaningful based on that type of data. And unfortunately, it limits the potential of LXPs. It limits the potential of a lot of talent platforms out there.
Yeah. Well, I just think of the connection between content. Again, the Netflix analogy, I hate it, but it's relevant to this because you think about it. If Netflix just knows you like action movies and that's it, I mean, there's so many different genres of action movies. It's going to say, here, you like action movies. Here's a movie you like. And you get into it and you go, I don't enjoy, like, this is completely irrelevant to anything I'm doing. And it's like, well, that's not Netflix's fault. It's because it only has data that you like this broad, high level category. It cannot possibly know, oh, you like this type of action movie with this type of, these type of characters, this type of plot line, the less data it has, the less specific and personalized it can be.
Yeah, for sure. And I would say Netflix, even it's not as bad of a problem because when you're going on Netflix, you're okay wasting your time most of the time. You're coming to entertain yourself. When you're trying to find a course, you're not trying to waste your time. Every hour spent on that course, it could be spent somewhere else building a better skill that is more relevant for your career. So for learning, the problem is enhanced compared to Netflix.
Yes. Well, significantly. I mean, I just think we're referencing Coursera here, but you don't want to have to get through a 6 weeks Coursera course and then go, well, that wasn't anything that was actually, I mean, that's time invested in something that you go, well, I would have gladly spent that time had it have been more relevant to me. I like you said, I think the stakes are much higher than, yes, with Netflix.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this, and this may open up a can of worms, but we'll see. We got time. From a timing standpoint, because this again can feel, if you're trying to solve this for the enterprise and you're a big F500 company for everyone, this could seem like this feels monumental. But what does it actually look like from a timing standpoint, even just estimates to start making some progress? Because I think sometimes people want to get to the destination and then they look where the flag is and they give up instead of going, well, just one step at a time. What does that process look like? And what kind of timing are you talking here?
Yeah. So the timing is twofold. First, before you can make any prediction on the skills you will acquire over the next few years, you need a baseline. So we need to time how long does it take for an enterprise to get to value, get from we have nothing to we have now a baseline across 500 skills that we care about. That for us approximately will take a month within launch. So we will start working with an enterprise. We will do all this configuration work to configure the platform to their needs, because every enterprise is different and cares about different skills. Once we have this configuration in place, we invite the employees on their respective pathways they've been set on. And then within 2 to 4 weeks of being invited, all the data start populating the dashboard, because the employees start taking the tests and they have deadlines. And then at that point, everyone is on a different timeline, because certain employees will have goals that are very ambitious in certain technical areas. Other employees will have goals that are more at the literacy level or the fluency level or the data acumen level or cybersecurity acumen level. And then we can provide you predictions for how long we think someone can get from A to B based on what we're monitoring in the market. It differs across employees. What matters is that from that point, you can start building, you can start having granular measurement on the platform, so that your skills pulse is updated on a weekly basis, and you can start seeing how much progress we're making. We have a concept called learning velocity, which usually people love, because it's not only important to know where you're at, it's also important to know at what speed you're gaining those skills. And are you going
whether you're on track in a good pace or a bad pace is actually very motivating or demotivating if you don't have that.
Yeah. The pace is very important. It's a reflection of your culture of learning, essentially.
Okay. So I've got a follow-up question on that, but I think one of the things I want to recap, because this can be something where people might be thinking, oh, this is years in the making to even get to that baseline. And if I'm hearing you correctly, yes, there's some front end work to say we need to identify what skills you really want to get some visibility into, so that you can actually capture this, figure out who those audiences are. But to actually start getting and baselining your data, this isn't like a 12-month exercise.
No, you can get there in 1 or 2 months to get the baseline. You cannot get to it for every single skill, obviously, but for the skills that are available, measurable on our platform, you can get there in a month, roughly.
Okay. So when we talked early on, and then I've got another question for you. We talked earlier on of kind of the difference between this, not bad, but just much more light, high touch pulse that doesn't necessarily give you deep assessment in the skills versus this deep, rich, more comprehensive assessment. When we talk about the fact that is deeper, richer, more friction, I mean, what are we talking about here? Is this like a comp exam that you're studying for 8 weeks? Or, I mean, how intense is one of these assessments?
So the validity often comes from the rigor of the assessment and also the time spent on the assessment. So when I mean high friction, I mean that you want to use this momentum and energy to ask them to spend at least like an hour and a half on the platform testing skills. But then you cannot ask them on a daily basis to spend an hour and a half. You can ask them on a monthly, 3-month basis. But what it looks like is it really depends on the skill. But the way you can think of it is there is a skill you want to measure. The skill has a certain cognition, and you're going to write a question to measure that skill. We do that for in that case, we do that for the skills. But the question may be a multiple choice, a multiple select, a fill in the blank, coding. It may be different things depending on the cognition you're trying to measure and the skill you're talking about. And then when the user comes in, they start to answer a question. The computer adaptive test will analyze their answer and decide what is the best next question that I can ask to maximize the information on what the manager wanted to learn. And then you go. After an hour and a half, the algorithm will stop and say, I have a decent confidence that allow me to baseline you. And we will report you the confidence. And then from there, you will have to demonstrate granular progress. Those lower friction assessment may be a short exercise that you do on a daily basis, maybe a self-assessment where we ask you how good you think you are in this area. Maybe it's a peer assessment, or maybe it's a manager assessment, something that is low touch and easy to do, but not like an hour and a half of testing.
Okay. Well, but you answered, I think one of the jests of my original questions was, how much does this initial assessment? And you said it's about 90 minutes, is hour and a half to actually go into it. And how many skills is that assessing in that time period? Is that one skill for an hour and a half, or is it actually doing kind of a bit of a peppering of them? And is that where the AI is coming in, is kind of trying to figure out, based on how you're handling this, what skills you have?
The most popular approach that enterprises use on Workera is they create skill sets and they stack skill sets on top of each other to create pathways. So what I was showing you earlier was one skill set. Each skill set has roughly 3, 4, 5 domains. Each domain, like data science, breaks down into subdomains, breaks down into topics, breaks down into subtopics, all the way down into skill. Each domain is approximately tens of skills, sometimes more. But you can think of one skill set as 4 domains, tens of skills. So let's say about 200 skills within a skill set. So an hour and a half to get prediction across like 200 skills.
Okay. No, I mean, that's extremely helpful, because if you're saying an hour and a half to get, just a handful of skills, that's one thing, but it's not an unreasonable amount of time to actually start to benchmark your organization and say, here's kind of where you're at. I am curious though, this may just open up way too much for the couple minutes we have, but there is still this step of now taking that and saying, how are you mapping that to projects and things like that? Is that happening before, or is that happening after they have benchmarks?
Upfront. That's part of the configuration. Is we have a team of psychometricians and solutions architects that will come work with your managers and leaders to identify what are the competencies that you care about that map to your projects, and then we will configure Workera to measure those competencies that you care about, because measuring skills that are irrelevant will not really help in any way.
Okay. No, and that's super helpful. So part of that upfront exercise is actually taking the time to define, what are you actually working on as an organization? And then we're going to help you figure out what skill capabilities you actually need to be able to accomplish those things. Then we'll assess on that kind of stuff.
Correct.
Because that's part of the process. Because I have to imagine I don't know, I've got mixed reviews on where this would go. But if you just go to an organization and say, what projects, you tell us what skills that is, that may not necessarily get you where you want to go. So that's actually part of the process, saying, let us help you figure out what skills actually tie to that. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's fair. I would say that there are 2 cases. One is, if you have an ontology to look at, now you can work with something, because you can start tagging. If you were talking about an area where there is no ontology, and then the conversations are higher level, there's not really concrete back and forth between the technical experts and the manager, then it's more complicated. So what we do in those cases is we may create the ontology for you if we don't have it in our own, and bring it to you. Yeah.
Okay. So not having a well-defined ontology is not necessarily a barrier to being able to do it. It just adds some complexity and work on the front end to actually get to that point.
We would agree. There are cases where certain industries have problems in time series. They have problems in speech that we did not support early on, but we worked with them in creating the ontology, creating the assessments, and now they have an assessment that is very relevant to what they were looking for.
Okay. Well, that I think helps, just at least for anybody who's thinking about this. Because again, you start thinking about some of these things, it can get overwhelming very quickly if you feel like you're trying to solve all this on your own. And I think that even some of the assessment piece, if you're trying to, I've seen organizations internally try to build their own skill assessments. I will just say I would not recommend it. It's not going to be as relevant.
It's easy to write a quiz. It's very hard to write a rigorous assessments. It's very, very hard.
That's just it. I was going to say, like, if all you're looking to do is ask a couple true, false, or multiple choice questions based on a couple random points of information, anybody can do that. But to actually write an assessment that is well defined and actually assesses capability and skill, that's not something that you just want to do on the back of a napkin over happy. It's not an area I would recommend people just tread lightly in. So, okay. Well, Kian, as it was last time, I thoroughly enjoyed this. It was also great to get a chance to actually see what the platform actually is and how it works. I appreciate you being here and digging into this, because this is a hot topic in the industry, and for good reason. I think this isn't just an L&D and talent discussion either. Business leaders are up at night trying to figure this out within their functions. So thank you for making the time. I'm curious to see where you go with the power skills piece, because we didn't even scratch that surface on this. And that is an area that that affects a lot of people in every domain. And I think how you're actually assessing what that looks like and how that's baselining is fascinating. So I'm looking forward to seeing where things continue to go.
Yeah, no, thank you very much for having me, Christopher. Always a pleasure, and I love your questions as usual. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Well, thank you for being there. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Hopefully this has got you to think a little bit deeper about skills and what that actually looks like, getting to a place you want to be. Yeah, more to come on that. Have a great rest of your week, everyone.